To pull up your notes, as I will mine. So I will call this meeting to order. This is the Committee of the Whole, August 13th, 2020. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we will proceed. We'll move to item number 3, which is a delegation. Madam Clerk, are our guests in attendance?
Yes, Rob Hatton will allow them in. They're just sitting in the waiting room.
Okay. Is someone going to make an introduction of these guests, or would you like me to?
Randy or Scott? Scott, I think, has joined us and he's presenting the report. So he would probably be able to introduce Christine.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Yes, have the guests joined? We'll maybe wait until they join.
So I see Christine has joined and Anthony is on as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden Hicks. Oh, sorry.
My apologies. Do we have Colin as well?
I don't think he has joined us.
Okay.
Through the chair, they're together. They're in front of the same computer.
Oh, very good. So Anthony and Colin are together. Okay, Scott, you're on.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden Hicks. Joining us this morning, we have Christine Loft from Loft Planning, who has been the planner for the Georgian Heights proposal. And we have Anthony and Colin, who are both congregation members of the proposed place of worship and school facility. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to them and I'll speak later during the report section.
Very good. Thank you, Scott. I don't know who would like to start. Christine?
I'll start. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Christine Loft and I'm the planning consultant working on behalf of the applicant, Georgian Heights. I am going to keep my comments fairly brief. Scott's report is very thorough, and I think from that report you can see the extensive review and back and forth that the county staff, municipal staff, and I have had. So with me today, as you've indicated, are Anthony Petter and Colin Bartel, who are congregation members. And they were involved in discussions with the county and the municipality early on prior to the congregation engaging my services. So certainly Anthony and Colin are aware of the process and have the full history on the application. They were also at the pre-consultation meeting as well as the statutory public meeting. So before you are official plan amendments to permit a private school and a place of worship at 137855 Grey Road 12 in the municipality of Meaford. And the lands are designated agricultural. Georgian Heights have been committed to finding a location to establish a private school and church for their congregation. They spent 2016 and 2017 searching for sites. And when sites came to their attention, they would request comments from municipal staff and had discussions about many sites over those 2 years. In 2018, the subject lands became available, and then my services were engaged and planning applications ensued. And since that time, the congregation has now closed on the deal and are the owners of the property. So once I was engaged in 2018, then we had a formal pre-consultation meeting with county staff and a review of what the overall planning process would look like. We did hear the comments from County Council at the time of the early information report that was before you and moving forward through into the statutory public meeting. Planning staff, both Scott and Liz at the municipality of Meaford, have had a lot of communication on this file, a lot of back and forth, many addendums on my part focusing on policy areas that we felt needed to be met, both from the early county council comments as well as ministry comments that Scott had received. So at this point, we feel that we've sort of covered off all of the policy review. The primary focus of those addendums and a lot of our back and forth was location and the overall locational search. MDS requirements, and as well as just a general policy review of the related use. So on behalf of Georgian Heights, I'm confident that the applicants have identified their general search area. They've definitely met the overall requirements, in my opinion, for the locational search. They did look for lands that were rurally designated, first and foremost, and ultimately the only property that met their locational search was not on Highway 26, was of a suitable size, and also was available for purchase, which of course is not written in the policy, but it's rather important when you're purchasing lands. So with respect to the MDS, there has been a thorough review, discussions, addendums, and back and forth with Scott and Liz. And Scott's staff report, I think, has a good summary of that MDS, and much of it, the chart and the back and forth that we've had are identified in the staff report before you, so I won't go into the details. Georgian Heights is looking forward to investing in their community and establishing the school and this church for their congregation, and having a location that the congregation can use for gathering, for their outdoor activities, and for continued learning. So on behalf of Georgian Heights, we would ask committee to support the recommendation before you. And now, through the chair, Anthony and Colin have a few words to speak to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Loft. So Anthony and Colin, you're on deck.
Can you hear us?
We can, yes.
Okay, well, I thank you for the opportunity to consider this application. A few points that we want to lift out as far as the size of or I should back up a little bit. I'm going to present a few points, and then Colin will also cover a few points. The size of our congregation, we're currently at about 80 people gathering. There are other families that have purchased land and are looking to move into this area, and there's other interest. It's not been super fast growing, but it's just a steady growth, and I think that's good. As far as this area, the importance of this area, it's a community that we've fallen in love with. We like this area, we like the community, the people, and our goal is to be an asset to the community. And we've been searching. I add up the amount of time we've been searching. It's getting close to 5 years that we've been searching. We've presented this property and that one, and talked to Rob Armstrong. Would this one work? And we come up with what we felt was the best solution that we had available. It's centrally located, and it's a area more in the rural without crowding neighbors in a rural setting. Play areas, all of that to accommodate what we're looking for. And as far as being part of the community, our goal is to be a part of this community, to be a support, to be an asset to the larger community. We have different events that we've put on and invited many in the community to. Christmas concerts, senior suppers. More recently, there was an elderly lady that passed away. Our youth group we put an evening together and went to help clean up her house for the family, just hauling out garbage and just cleaning up the yard. And other events such as there's been fires. After fires, we've assisted in cleanup there, and we want to continue to do this. So I'll turn it over to Colin. He can take the last few points that we have.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for consideration. Let's see, where did you stop, Anthony? Well, here's a point about what it means, you know, to get our own facility. It feels like so far we've been renting like community halls and a few different community halls. We've rented the old Meaford offices there in Rockland. That's where we're currently having our school. And so we're enough people now. It just feels like it is soon time to get into an established place. So I know we're meeting at Bogner now for our church services. Well, not now during COVID, but they're planning a big renovation there. So then we'll be looking again. But anyway, so that'll feel good to us if we can get an established spot to meet, and this one is so nicely centrally located for us. Another thing, yeah, we know the big thing is it's ag land. It feels to us like this might be a good choice if we do need to use ag land because it is just a small piece cut off by the river. So we were hoping that you would feel that way as well. So I guess the last point on our list here is our vision or goals for this facility, which of course would be our weekly Sunday meetings. Probably once a month for sure. We'd have a Sunday evening meeting, you know, that, and this is everybody welcome in the community as well. We'd have that sign by the road. And those community events that were earlier brought up, like Christmas concerts and senior suppers. Sometimes you have to put on a senior supper for Thanksgiving, weddings, funerals, things like that. So, and I think I've counted up at least, what was it, 7, 8, 9, I think there's 10 of our 10 people listening to this as well. They're showing their support and interest from our group. So just thought I'd let you know that. And that's about what we have here, I guess.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Loft, Mr. Penner, and Mr. Bartel for your your delegation, and thank you as well for attending all those supporters of Georgian Heights Church. I'll turn things over to council now. Are there any questions of the delegates? Seeing none, thank you very much for your attendance again. Council will move to item number 4. We're looking at the consent agenda. Is there anything that requires a separate discussion? And if there is not, then I will entertain a motion, which is moved by Councillor Patterson and seconded by Councillor Potter.
Mr. Deputy Warden?
Yeah. Yes?
I would like to pull item G, which is the minutes of the Affordable Housing Task Force.
Thank you. So we're back to the motion then, with the exception of item G, which will be pulled at the end. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Potter, that we approve the consent agenda as presented. Anybody opposed? Seeing no objection, that is carried. So we are now going to turn item number 6, 6A, which is going to be the Georgian Heights Church discussion. And Scott, I believe that you will be presenting that. And it's moved by Councillor Klumpus and seconded by Councillor Carlton. So Scott, you're on.
Great. Thanks again, Deputy Warden Hicks and members of council. I am going to try to share my screen here. Can everyone see the presentation that's come up there, hopefully?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, excellent. I will get going then. So our delegation gave a great overview of the process to date, so I'll try to keep this somewhat brief. I know my report was fairly lengthy in this regard. I will say from a staff perspective, just to quote a former county councillor, we've kind of got splinters here because we've been sitting on the fence so long on this one, because there really are lots of compelling reasons to support this proposal. And ultimately, my staff report is recommending approval of this proposal. But there are some policy concerns that have been raised that would also lead for an argument that maybe we wouldn't consider this. But again, my recommendation is that we do support it. And I'll just walk you through a bit of that. The lands in question are highlighted on your screen there. They are about 10 hectares in size. They're southwest of the current former town of Meaford by about 4.5 kilometers away. As you can see, they do have direct access onto Grey Road 12, and the rear property of the boundary backs onto the Big Head River in this regard. What they're proposing, as we've heard, is a joint school and place of worship. And I should note that from both a county and provincial policy perspective, this proposal would be supported wholeheartedly by the policy. And in fact, we wouldn't even need a county official plan amendment if the congregants of this operation relied on horse-drawn vehicles as their primary mode of transportation. Both provincial policy and county policy has exemptions in place for institutional uses for communities that use horse-drawn vehicles. But in this case, the proposed users of this facility would use a mixture of private automobile, but also active transportation in terms of walking and bicycling to the facility. And as we've heard, there are a number of people that live in the area and greater interest in moving to the area as well. The proposed facility is going to be serviced by a well and septic system. And I should note that the municipality of Meaford has recently adopted their municipal official plan amendment on this file and approved the zoning bylaw amendment, which are both contingent on approval from the county of the county official plan amendment. The next slide just shows a rendering that's been supplied by the applicant of what the proposed facility may look like in this regard. As Ms. Loft mentioned, there has been a lot of discussion on this one. We had a great public meeting with the municipality of Meaford, a joint public meeting. It was a packed house that night, and it was all thanks to supporters of the proposed place of worship and school there to support the proposal. We did have a number of planning addendums prepared by Ms. Loft, and there was also some servicing work and some environmental work prepared in support of this proposal. In terms of public comments, we heard questions about the local water supply and septic systems. In this regard, I would say that the servicing analysis has demonstrated that it can be serviced via private services, and that the proposed septic system is under the threshold whereby we need any sort of provincial approval on that septic system. One of the public comments was with respect to the impacts of farming on the Big Head River. And as much as that's an important comment, it's not something we can really consider through this application. And things like the application of pesticides or fertilizers aren't something that we can get into in our planning documents. And I would further note that in this case, they're proposing the institutional facility and not a new farming operation along the river here. There were some questions about what's called the natural severance on this one. So this piece of property used to be part of a slightly larger piece of land, and based on the river cutting through the rear of the property and a strip of county-owned land, they were able to go through a natural severance process, which is a process which doesn't require any public consultation. It doesn't require any municipal approvals or county approvals. It's more of a legal process. So the public was just trying to understand, and rightfully so, how this lot came to be created. And then we also did have some comments with respect to traffic and road safety, just based on the fact that we could have children walking or cycling to this facility along Grey Road 12. And I will say that our county transportation staff have been very useful in their original comments on the application, simply noting that they'd require a commercial entrance permit, but also then in going through and reviewing those public comments and helping ensure that that what we have before us, if approved, will in fact be safe for all users of Grey Road 12 in this regard. We did get comments from a lot of the regular agencies. They are generally supportive with respect to the proposal, other than a few comments from some of the provincial ministries, which I'll get into in just a second. Gray Sabo will require a permit for this proposal based on the proximity to the Big Head River in this regard. And they've given some technical specifications and made some minor adjustments to the proposal just to make sure that the proposed development is outside of any areas which could potentially flood in this regard. The ministry staff from Municipal Affairs and the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs have been tremendously helpful on this application. In addition to the many discussions I had with Meaford staff on this and Christine Loff and her client had with Meaford staff as well, we've taken a lot of guidance from the ministry here, just both in terms of this application and their perspective on how similar applications may have been dealt with across the rest of the province. The ministry comments really boil down to two outstanding issues, if you will. Their initial comment was with respect to, well, have you adequately searched elsewhere outside of an agricultural area where you could put the site? And as we heard from our delegation today, they've been searching for almost 5 years now. And I can personally attest to many emails and phone calls where they had a new potential lead and they'd ask about a property and in some cases, for whatever reason, it simply wasn't feasible for this location. In this regard, they have narrowed their search to rural areas because the community and the congregants of this proposed operation do lead a rural way of life, similar to some of the horse and buggy institutional operations we're used to seeing in other parts of the countryside. The other issue that the ministry had raised comments was with respect to minimum distance separation. And I'm just going to go into this a little bit. For those that may be unfamiliar, minimum distance separation is the provincial formula that guides municipalities in terms of citing either new farm or non-farm uses. And there's two separate formulas, one if you're looking at a new non-farm use and one if you're looking at a new farm use. And they're specifically meant to put appropriate setbacks in place from livestock facilities or manure storage facilities, such that we minimize the possibility for odor-based conflicts between livestock and manure storage in that regard. And they further break it down when we're looking at citing new non-farm uses into two types of applications, if you will. There's a type A use, which is generally, a residential dwelling or a more minor non-farm use, if you will. And that has what's called a single factor MDS calculation. So it's less of a separation distance. And I should note here that if this were a horse and buggy institutional operation, it would be clear that this would be a type A MDS calculation. The province also sets aside a type B MDS calculation, which is roughly double the setback distance from a type A. And these are for uses that you might find in the countryside that have a higher level of use and therefore potentially more potential for conflict. And the line the ministry has drawn in the sand in this regard is that all other institutional uses beyond those served by horse and buggy fall into this type B application of minimum distance separation. And the province has been useful on instructing us about the guideline in this regard. And Christine and her team have been great about doing the calculations both from a type A perspective and a type B perspective to neighboring livestock facilities. And there were 6 farms identified in this regard, and in terms of the minimum distance separation calculations, they meet the required setback distance for a type A use on all 6, and a type B use, they would meet it on 4 of the 6 operations. So there are 2 that they wouldn't quite meet that setback distance to on a type B use. And what Ms. Loft has put forward is if you like, a common sense approach to suggest that this should be considered a type A use because for all intents and purposes, it would function very similar to those institutional uses utilized by people who rely on horse and buggy. These are members of our rural and farm community, and therefore it's very unlikely that there would be any sort of odor conflict in this regard. So they've provided justification to consider this as a type A calculation. And I will say the provincial guidelines do allow municipalities to consider a variance to MDS where individual site-specific circumstances would support that. And both county and municipal staff have been very stringent in the past on applying these variances just to really protect our farm community. So they're not done very often, but there have been a few over the years. And finally, what I just wanted to outline is as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, there is a strong rationale for support of this proposal, but there are some outstanding policy concerns that could lead to a refusal or a challenge of this proposal. I have covered the MDS, and what I will say in this regard is if this proposal were not to be located on this property, we have a 4-hectare existing property, so we're not expecting a major farming operation to locate on this property. The most likely use, should this proposal not be cited here, would be a house. And a house would be considered a type A. So what Ms. Loft has recommended and what Meaford has done through their municipal approvals is to suggest that this use be considered here and that a variance be considered here to consider this a type A use, such that it wouldn't have negative impacts on neighboring farms if they were ever to go and try to expand their farming operations, whether it be their barns or the manure storage facilities. I would note that this is the one objection that the province has outlined in this regard. With respect to applications of this nature or any planning application, planning staff always try to envision what would happen if council's decision was appealed in this regard. So in this case, if council saw fit to approve the proposal and that approval was appealed, whether it be by a neighbor or even potentially by the province, what would our arguments be? And yeah, as I stated earlier, I do think we could put forward the argument that they have done an extensive search to try to find a location here. And they've taken a fairly practical, if you like, common sense approach to the application of the minimum distance separation policies here and the variance in that regard, and trying to ensure that neighboring farms would not be restricted from future expansion should they seek to expand in the future. Should council seek to refuse this application, we could take a hardline approach on the policy and say that no, the provincial guidelines are clear that this is a type B use, and because it doesn't meet it to 2 of the 4 farming operations, maybe there should be refusal. In this case, if there was a refusal, the potential appeals would be either the proponent themselves or the municipality of Meaford. And I really do think if this went to the local planning appeal tribunal, it is almost a 50-50 or a coin toss here as to whether or not the tribunal would support or deny this application. There are very strong arguments on either side. Should there be an appeal of an approval, the county's current appeal protocol is that we wouldn't be at the tribunal to support that. We typically don't appear before the tribunal to support private development applications where council has approved it. However, should council seek to refuse this application, then we would be there and we would be called upon to defend that position. However, as I said, staff are satisfied that official plan amendment number 5 does meet the tests set out by both provincial and local policy, and we are recommending support of this proposal and that the bylaw be prepared for the coming county council session in September. So that's all I have at this stage, but I'll certainly be happy to take any questions if there are any.
It would help if I turned myself off mute. Thank you, Scott, for that presentation and for your report. I have to say, my goodness, what a lot of work has gone into this and a lot of time spent, and certainly the rendition looks very, very good. Council, are there any questions?
Deputy Warden, I have Councillors Soever and Potter.
Thank you. We'll start with Councillor Soever.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Deputy Warden. I'm inclined to support the proposal. However, I have a question. would it be possible to put her, I noticed one of the concerns was that a future owner, what a future owner might do if the property was ever sold, or any potential, future uses. And I wouldn't want our approval to apply to any future uses which might be against the provincial policies. So I'm wondering if it's possible to require that a restrictive covenant be put on, which limits its future uses should the property be sold. I think its current use as a place of worship for a largely rural community and a school is not going to really be in conflict with the adjacent farming operations. And obviously for rural kids, it's great to have a rural school rather than in a settlement area. But should things change, and land values are very expensive there, and that property ever be sold, I wouldn't want the new owner to be thinking that they're buying a place that is grandfathered. So I'm just wondering if it might be possible to put restrictive covenants on the uses.
So Scott, I don't know if you're the appropriate person to respond, or perhaps legal counsel.
I can maybe start us off here, and if Michael wants to chime in afterwards, that would be great. Thank you for your question, Councillor Soever. I must admit, that's not something we've investigated as part of this proposal. We have thought forward to, what would the potential future use be, and many of our former churches and one-room schoolhouses across the county, when they cease to be needed for those institutional uses, quite often were ultimately renovated to become residential uses. And certainly I don't see a conflict should this use ever cease to be with someone, converting the building to a house. And, it would be very similar to the other houses along Grey Road 12 in that regard. One of the struggles with this application has been that we typically plan for the land and the land use, and we don't typically plan for the specific users of the application. And so, there's an adage in planning that we don't zone based on the people, so to speak. But we have had to think about this one, as you've raised, from what would the future use be. I'm not aware of whether or not a restrictive covenant would be useful in that regard. I think if legal counsel were supportive, and if we wanted to go down that route, from a staff perspective, I'd recommend maybe sort of buttoning down the future uses, but still allowing for certain other ones like a residential use. I'm not sure if Michael would have any further comments on the use of a covenant in this regard.
Sure. Michael?
Good morning, County Council. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly fine.
I could give some comments, but I would suggest that they would be best addressed in closed session. So I'd leave it to where you want to go with that.
Perhaps, Madam Clerk, I'll look for your guidance on this, but perhaps we can go to other questions, and we'll determine at the end of those questions whether there's a need to go into closed session.
I think that would be a great approach. We don't have closed session on this agenda, so we would need a 2/3 vote of council in order to add it to the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Then we'll turn next to Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Yes, and my question is along the same lines. We have a lot of experience with this kind of thing, especially with short accommodations. We just the other day set a requirement that these be listed even in the marketing materials, that they cannot, if anybody who's thinking of buying should know that they cannot use it as an income property for short-term accommodation. So everybody has good intentions at the beginning, but then somewhere down the line, the property sells, a new owner says that, well, nobody told me that a livestock operation produces an odor. So we end up with a problem, and it would just be clearer to everyone, for the sake of clarity, to make sure that it's registered and that everybody knows where they stand.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Were there any other hands raised, Madam Clerk? I don't,
I see.
Councillor Milne has a hand up.
And Councillor Mackey.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, or Deputy Warden, rather. I fully understand the challenge with trying to site a facility similar to this. We've ran into this in Southgate with the horse and buggy community on many occasions. And I can tell you, and as Scott as well know, the hard-fought exemption for the horse and buggy community is well appreciated and is well used. But my concern here is that this is not a horse and buggy community. They're a car driving community, and so in that respect, they're no different than any other group that may come forward in our community.
And here.
Councillor Milne, something has happened with your sound. I don't know if your microphone has been bumped or something, but I wonder if you could just take a look at that.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you very, very faintly.
Well, I'll try to speak up. Is that better?
Somewhat, but yes, not great.
I don't know what's wrong.
Okay, I can hear you in a very faded way, so continue.
All right. So the challenges of this application, and I can appreciate that they want to be in a rural setting, but that in my mind is not a valid reason for circumventing the policies that are put in place to protect the ag community. There's a reason why we designated some of our lands agricultural and some rural, and that's to protect the ag community from nuisance complaints. If some of you remember, back in the 80s, 40 years ago, there was a thing called a retirement lot, and farmers were afforded retirement lots. Well, the average retirement lot lasted about 5 years, and then it was sold to a non-ag community or a non-ag occupant, and the fight is on about smell, dust, noise, everything else. I'm not suggesting that would happen in this case, but I feel very strongly that the reasons for the ag policies are put in place for good reason, and the reason that is put forward here basically to say that, well, we want to be in a rural setting and we can't find anything else, that's not good enough. If somebody comes to me and says, well, I really want to put my house in a rural setting and I'd like to put my severance here, I'm sorry, if it's designated agricultural, sorry, we're not going to do that. We're not going to go down this road again and cause conflict in the future, because ultimately that's what's going to happen. You're going to have a scrap down the road. It may not be us dealing with it, but somebody will be. And I can't support this. I've seen too much from the past that has come back to bite us and cause conflict. I fully understand staff's conflict on this because, or their hesitation, because they've gone back and forth and they've done a lot of work on this, and I appreciate that. But I cannot support this. And finally, I would just say it would be interesting to know, if we had the Ag Advisory Committee in place, what their thoughts would be. And I suspect I know what it might be, but we can only speculate. That's all I have, Mr. Deputy Warden. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. And despite the sound issues, your voice was loud and clear, as was your position, passionate as it was. We turn next to Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Deputy Warden, and through you to Scott. You mentioned, Scott, that 2 farming operations fall within the B schedule of MDS. If County Council approves this application, could those 2 farming operations be impacted as far as future farm operations?
Scott?
Sure, through you, Deputy Warden. Thanks for that question. So in this case, what staff are recommending, along with the approval, should council look to approve this, would be an exemption to clarify that this is a type A land use, such that the neighboring farm operations wouldn't be any further impacted than if there was a house built on this property in the future, which is the other potentially logical use. I will say that in this particular area of the municipality, there is already a decent number of non-farm lots in the area. So in some cases, the farms are already restricted by some of the houses that were severed in the past that, as Councillor Milne pointed out, certainly wouldn't be supported for severance today. But they wouldn't, the farms wouldn't be any further impacted by this proposal if council were to support the exemption to the type A, but that certainly doesn't mean that the farms can already expand because there are some issues in the area already. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's.
Councillor Mackey?
Well, thanks, Scott. I guess I'm struggling, like Councillor Millen, that with the exemption to the A, this is clearly a B type operation. So I'm having some difficulty with that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any other hands raised?
Yes, Councillor Klumpus, and Councillor Millen has a secondary question.
We'll start with Councillor Klumpus.
Thank you very much, Deputy Warden, and to all for your comments, and especially to Scott for a very, very thorough presentation and also report on this issue. We too struggled with the demands of the current official plan in this regard, specific to the horse and buggy transportation issue. But it seems one of the things that is of concern to us, as to all of our rural communities, is in the loss of productive farmland to either a commercial venture or housing or something of that nature. So that too was certainly kept in mind when we looked at this from the decision point of view. The statement that the land in question is not a particularly productive venue for agricultural product, and the fact too that this type of building a community is also attracting other farm families to come into our area who are purchasing farm agricultural properties. And we value that and appreciate it. And so from that perspective, looking at the thorough investigation and consideration from not only the proponent and Christy Loft, their planner, but also talking with the proponents themselves, I've really come to understand what it is they hope to achieve and what they plan on becoming as fully integrated members of our community, and we welcome that. My other understanding is that should an amendment be granted here for this official plan, should the property be sold in the future, and an amendment would be then required for that particular permitted use, there would have to be an application which would then at that time be considered for alternate uses for that amendment. So from that perspective, I feel that that worry or that concern is somewhat mitigated and protected for the future. But in the meantime, this is deemed by our council and hopefully by many of my fellow colleagues on county council to be a very worthwhile endeavor for that particular piece of land. Thank you, Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Councillor Klumpus. Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I don't know, has my sound been improved any?
It is improved, sir. Yes.
All right. Well, I'll speak louder anyway. I just a question for Scott rather. If this church or this facility existed now, and I owned a farm across the road and wanted to build a dairy barn, would the MDS calculation be a type A or a type B?
Scott?
Sure. Through you, Deputy Warden. If the institutional facility already existed on this site and there was no site-specific zoning exemptions in place, then in that regard, it would be up to the building official to determine whether this is a horse and buggy institutional operation or a non-horse and buggy institutional operation. And if it was a non-horse and buggy institutional operation, then the provincial guidelines would say it's a type B, so the double factor MDS in this regard.
And if I might, Mr. Deputy Warden, we've run into this situation in Southgate on different occasions as well. And I just know how it would go if we tried to push through with, well, we want to put a dairy barn here. We can't put it halfway in the back of the farm and build a 500-foot driveway back to the dairy barn. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. I see Councillor Keaveney's hand up. Madam Clerk, was there anyone else?
No, I just see Councillor Keaveney as well.
Councillor Keaveney?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Warden, and I just wanted to speak in support of Councillor Klumpus's comments, and we did have very, very thorough conversation about this proposal at Meaford Council, and I just wanted to reinforce the suggestion that I believe approving this would allow our agricultural community to grow, as has been said, to attract more families. And I think I also consider the type of education that would be provided here for the children, and that it would be rural-based, and I think would be very supportive of that growth of our farm area. And I spoke earlier in good news about the number of farm gate operations that we're seeing, and I know most of those are operated by members of this congregation, and they are very much involved and supportive of our community. And I would very much like to see this project go forward, and recognizing again the diligence that has been undertaken in trying to secure a location, and again understanding that this location has taken a long time to discover, and it seems to be very appropriate. And I think it is a right decision to go forward and allow this congregation to build their church and school here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keaveney, and thank you everyone for your input. Good discussion. Madam Clerk, sorry.
That's okay.
I was going to say, Madam Clerk, with your leave, I think it might be appropriate to entertain a motion, if that would come from Councillor Soever, and perhaps seconded by Councillor Potter, with respect to going into closed session. I suppose if people were opposed to going into closed session, they could defeat that motion.
That is correct. We would need two-thirds. Yes, I do see Councillor Mackey's hand up again for a secondary question. I don't know if you would like to entertain that before we move forward with anything else.
Yes, Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Deputy Warden, and through you to Scott, just wondering, has there been any opposition to any of the surrounding farms to this proposal?
Scott?
Sure, thank you for that question. In this regard, we haven't had any opposition to the application. The only comments we had were with respect to just ensuring road safety of the users and making sure that the servicing was appropriate. But we certainly haven't had any concerns raised by farmers in that regard. Now, the one comment I'll make there is that, just because there's no concerns doesn't mean there's no potential for future conflict. But at this stage, we didn't hear any concerns in that regard.
Thank you, Scott. Are you satisfied, Councillor Mackey?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you. Okay, then I'll turn my attention next. Councillor Soever, perhaps I'll look to you. Would you like to bring a motion with respect to going into closed session to receive legal advice?
I don't think it's necessary to go into closed session, because the question I asked is not really for legal advice. It was a factual matter. As you know, the question was not, should we put a restricted covenant on title? That is a decision for council, obviously, to make. The question I ask is it possible to put a restrictive and that is a factual matter. It's in the public domain somewhere, I'm sure. I'm sure our solicitor knows the answer. So, you know, I don't think that we need to go into close to hear the response, whether it's possible to put a restrictive covenant on title. I know that we do that short-term accommodations in the town of Blue Mountains in new developments, just to make sure that the buyer is aware that there, you know, we have a bylaw as well in a zoning, and it's impacted by zoning, but so often people don't know what are the conditions of the zoning when they purchase a property. So when there is actually restricted covenant on title, then it does work. So I was just wanting the solicitor to confirm whether it's possible that we put that on in this case, which would mean that, you know, the current owners obviously would be bound by that, and any future purchasers, and, you know, and what, so it's not really advice, it's whether it's possible. So I don't know.
So, if I might, Councillor Soever, I believe that your question was properly posed to our legal counsel, and my interpretation is that the answer that you received from Michael was that to answer that, he would recommend, I think, that we go into closed session. So I know that you may differ, but that's what I'm hearing. So I will allow you to put your motion if you wish, but if you don't, then we'll proceed with just the vote on the main item.
Okay, I think we can just move to the vote.
Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Patterson, thank you.
So just to be clear, if the exemption is approved, it's considered site specific? So then if the property is sold, an application would have to be made to the municipality to change that use from institutional back to either agricultural or residential or whatever. So that would cover that, right?
Scott?
Scott?
Thank you for that question, Councillor Patterson. That's a good question. In this case, what's been approved right now in the Meaford zoning bylaw is an agricultural exception. So essentially what's happening is they've taken the permitted uses already allowed on this property and added an exception to say that you can have one additional use, being a institutional facility. And by the way, that institutional facility shall be considered a type A land use. So if this property were to be sold in the future, somebody could come in and put in any one of those uses already permitted in the Meaford zoning bylaw, in addition to the institutional use. But the exception would rest with the property, not the property owner. So it would still be considered a type A use, and it would only be if they were looking at something outside of that list of permitted uses in the Meaford zoning bylaw, that then they need a zoning amendment in that regard, and possibly an official plan amendment. And the county official plan amendment is very similar in that we'd still be considering it designated as agricultural, but we'd have this exception on it to consider the institutional use in this regard.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, you good? Thank you.
Warden,
I think, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
I have Councillor Potter for a secondary question as well.
Okay, Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. And this question is probably to Scott. What impact would this have on neighboring farms if they wanted to expand or change their farming operations in the future? Would they be limited in some way by the proximity to this facility? Because I think we want to be careful. The reason we have right to farm legislation is to not squeeze farmers out of their own properties. And I just want to be sure that if we do give this approval, and I have no qualms at all about the proposal that we see, I'm thinking about the future.
Sure. If it helps, I might just share my screen one more time and just bring up the map showing the surrounding area, and then I'll answer Councillor Potter's question if that's appropriate. So just a second here. Can everyone see the air photo that's just come back up on the screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, excellent. So it's a good question, Councillor Potter. Thank you. And so what you see is the subject lands highlighted in blue there. And then you can see the surrounding area. So to the south and even to the southwest, we have a whole strip of residential lots already. And you can see there's some scattered across the countryside. There's also some barns in the area. So one of the barns is up here. One of the barns is over here. One of the barns is actually across the road. And so in this case, particularly for the barn across the road, they're already going to be feeling the impacts of the other non-farm development in the area. And similarly with the barn to the northwest here, there's a non-farm property across the road. So there is certainly potential that this could impact livestock expansion or manure storage facility expansion. The exception to go to a type A land use would minimize that setback distance. But in some cases, these barns may already be limited from expanding based on the amount of non-farm lot creation that's already in the area. And I should say that the county policies are fairly explicit that we wouldn't allow for a church or school to be severed from a farm any longer. And we don't allow for this type of non-farm lot creation in the agricultural designation any longer for all the reasons that Councillor Milne has aptly pointed out. I will say that the lot across the road recently went through a surplus farm dwelling severance, and that is the only type of new non-farm lot creation that's really considered in the agricultural designation other than for agriculture related uses like grain elevators. So to answer your question, this is a long-winded answer, I apologize. There is potential that this could impact neighboring farms, but they are already impacted by the amount of homes and non-farm lot creation already in the area.
Thank you, Scott. All right.
Mr. Deputy Warden?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have Councillor Desai with a question.
Councillor Desai, you've been quiet up till now. You're on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Warden. Planning's not my forte, so I try to say less on planning matters. But I do have a question. I do quite like Councillor Sever's idea of the restrictive covenant. And I'm not going to ask that we go into closed session. My question is related more to procedure, in the sense of if we do go ahead and assuming we approve of the application in front of us, could there be a follow-up motion to put a restrictive covenant on it, or would that not be procedurally okay?
Well, I would probably say, Councillor Desai, that if you want the issue of a restrictive covenant answered properly, you would probably want to go, as recommended by legal counsel, to go into closed session. So again, I will allow people to bring that motion if they want to. Otherwise, I think we move on to the main motion and have our vote.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Desai. Madam Clerk, anyone else?
I see Councillor Klumpus with a secondary.
Councillor Klumpus?
Councillor Klumpus, you're on mute still.
Oh.
Sorry about that. I would like a recorded vote, please.
Very good. All right, so we are ready to take the vote. It's going to be recorded vote, and Madam Clerk, you'll take over, but reminding everyone we're now going to be using the raise hands feature, correct?
No, I will be asking, and I will ask each person to indicate in favor or opposed. All right, so we are voting on the main motion from Scott's report.
Yes.
Councillor Mackey.
Opposed.
Councillor Gamble's not here. Councillor Burley.
In favor.
Councillor Carlton.
In favor.
Warden McQueen, I don't think has joined us again. Councillor Desai.
Opposed.
Councillor Patterson.
In favor.
Deputy Warden Hicks.
In favor.
Counselor Clumpus,
In favor?
Counselor Keaveney,
Yes.
Counselor Thomas,
In favor.
Counselor O'Leary,
In favor.
Counselor Woodbury,
Opposed?
Counselor Millen,
Opposed?
Counselor Soever,
In favor?
Counselor Potter,
Opposed?
Counselor Robinson.
Not in favor.
Okay, opposed. Counselor Hutchinson.
Opposed?
Okay, that vote is carried 51 to 31.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And thank you again to very good discussion. Thank you to our delegates, and thank you to all those people who attended, supporters of this proposal. Now, Madam Clerk, with your leave again, I think maybe it's time for a little break.
I would agree.
Might I suggest that we come back at, it's now 5 or 6 past. Might I suggest that we come back at 20 past?
That would be fine.
Thank you.
Please ensure your cameras and your mics are off for the break.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll be back at 11:20. Patterson did a nice summary for us, but I don't know if the council would permit me to, while Dr. Era is here, if anyone has any questions, and for the benefit of the public perhaps as well. Madam Clerk, would it be appropriate that I allow some questions of Dr. Era?
I think if we would keep it short, then yes, I think we could certainly allow some quick questions of Dr. Era.
Very good. So are we back live now, Rob?
Yes, we are.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. So we will then entertain some questions if council has questions of Dr. Era.
I see Counselor Soever's hand.
Okay, Counselor Soever.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. And I want to express my appreciation to the health unit for doing such a great job on following up and keeping the number of cases low. We do have a number of cases that do pop up from time to time, which is to be expected. And but because we've had so few, I do notice that a lot of our citizens are getting very complacent and in their attitudes towards social distancing, and it's a great concern that it creates issues. So I'm just wondering if it might be possible for the health unit to provide some information in a very generic way about how these new cases are getting into the community and what are the things that people should avoid doing. So I think if people understood that things like, I don't know how these cases are popping up, but I can surmise that it might be people having relatives visit them for the weekend because, you know, prolonged contact is one of the ways to, you know, spread it. But if we could maybe, is it possible for the health unit to identify where these weaknesses are that are letting cases into our community, and what we can do, not to, you know, change our lives to be imprisoned or anything, but what we can do to mitigate those risks.
Dr. Era?
Dr. Era, you're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see 3 points in the question, two questions, and then a third point. The first one is the source of cases, and some of these cases are, the risk is local, definitely. There's no a risk factor for travel or for a visitor whatsoever. And that really speaks to the fact that there is community spread. Other cases are, as you rightly said, related to somebody visiting or a person is visiting another area coming back. And there's a handful of cases in the recent months that came from the United States, whether it's a Canadian coming back from vacation or a person visiting their family, and there is a reason for them to cross the border and be here. Regardless, we look at the risk in our area. It's not significantly different from other areas. We are in better standing, no question. However, is that enough difference to justify dividing us versus them? Probably not. And for many reasons, we need to be careful with every interaction we have with another person, whether local or visitor. And we need to assume, it's a safe assumption that each one of us is actually carrying the virus. And with that assumption, we will conduct ourselves in a way that's going to prevent further transmission to other people and in the community. So that's a first part. And your note, can we provide more information about this? Too much communication is not enough with emergencies. So we definitely can put out some to that effect. Social distancing and other risk mitigation that people can do. Again, we repeat and repeat, and we will have to continue to repeat the advice. Probably 3 W's, looking at them as a reminder or as a way to remember them. Watching our distance, the 2 meters, ensuring it exists whenever we have the space, wearing a mask correctly, and washing our hands quite frequently with soap and water or hand sanitizer. These are the 3 things that got us through far with a safe reopening. And these are the 3 things that are going to continue to help us going forward. And the final point you mentioned is the public being tired or fatigued from the interventions and the messaging about the interventions. 2 types of fatigue. This is to be expected, no question. It will happen. We will continue again to provide that advice. And your question in this council is actually a really good vehicle of communication to the whole public, to know that we're still not out of the woods yet, and we need to do our best to protect the most vulnerable of us.
Thank you, Dr. Aaron. Madam Clerk, anyone else?
Councillor Millen and Councillor Potter.
Okay, Councillor Millen.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Warden. Dr. Era, I note as of yesterday, we have 115 recovered cases in Grey and Bruce. And I've had, people say to me, well, it's almost like a flu or a cold. Once you're recovered, it's all good. I'm just wondering, is there, in your mind, lingering effects that people should take this a little more serious than they are? And do we have any indication of those 115? Are there lingering effects of those 115?
So again, a very good question. Lingering effect of COVID is to be understood and learned as we go. By definition, the time frame, the window of time of our knowledge of this virus is 7 months, 8 months is not enough to see long-term effect. There are studies to observe for certain lung injury that is long-term, and there are some documents of it. However, we don't know if it's going to recover in 9 months or a year. The other 2 parts to the question, is this similar to the flu? No, it's not. It's actually 10-fold more severe than the flu from the numbers we're seeing about fatality rate. Fatality rate is the number of death related to the number of cases. So after we classify people as cases, how many of them die? And it is sitting globally around 5 to 7%. For the flu, it is 0.1%. So there is a huge difference. And we know down the road when we have the antibodies test and we test for people who are infected and recovered, that fatality rate is going to go down by definition, because the number of people infected is going to be larger than we know right now. However, it's not going to go down to 0.1, similar to the flu. It's going to be at least 10 times more severe. And the other part about the pandemic being different from the flu is the fact that none of us have immunity for it. The flu, all of us had some type of immunity, whether through a vaccine or through having the flu a couple times during our life. So the societal impact of the disease of the flu on the community is very similar to everything we see every year. There is a number of people get infected and the system can deal with it. However, with the pandemic being novel to the community and none of us have immunity to it, if you let it go through, the number of people infected will be 100%. And the number who are going to use the system is going to be tremendous. It's going to break down the system. And that was the worry before the first wave, to see, can we control it with the measures we have? And we implemented everything we have. And we were pleasantly reassured after 4 months, after 4 weeks from the shutdown, that we have the ability to control it with all these measures that I mentioned, the 3 Ws and few other things, including going to activities outdoors, avoiding crowds. Those 5 things are essential in our planning going forward. However, this is totally different from the flu, from the characteristic of the virus point of view and from the societal impact point of view.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, I know that we want to recognize Councillor Potter next, but I don't see any other hands. To Council, I just want to say I want to be respectful of, this is a very important issue, but we also want to be respectful of the clerk's guidance that we've added this and we want to keep it brief. So Councillor Potter?
Thank you. I hope my question will be fairly brief, is that how do we get across to people that it isn't Frankenstein and Dracula and the creature from the Black Lagoon that are spreading this? It's your coworker, your friend, your neighbor, somebody you meet during the course of the day. That's why it's so important that we wear masks, not to protect ourselves because we are not Chuck Norris, but to protect others. And that is, you know, when I see groups, and we talked last time about a group that is having meetings and events where they're promoting, you know, people showing up without masks and that kind of thing. When I see that, I realize that a lot of people just are not getting the message.
I think the answer is exactly the statement you made, to make it short for short time as well. It is not a stranger. It's not a monster who's transmitting this disease. It's any one of us, and each one of us could be the transmitter. Using mask or not is again an issue that controversial in the media. However, in reality, we see over 90% of the public are doing the right thing. And whenever you see a person wearing a mask, it's a statement that I'm supporting the community. And when you see a person not wearing a mask, again, it's a statement that tells a lot about the person.
Very good. So thank you, Dr. Ara. Madam Clerk, I don't think I saw any other hands.
No, sir.
So thank you, Dr. Ara. We appreciate your time and your work.
Thank you, and I apologize again for being late for this meeting.
No need. Okay, so I think this is the time to turn things over to our warden. I believe he's on the call now. And Mr. Warden, if you're there, we are at item 6B, paramedic response time plan with Kevin McNabb on deck.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Deputy Warden, and again, thank you for the great job that you have done this morning, and certainly the announcement today by the Minister of Tourism was certainly well welcomed. Okay, so moving on to item 6 then. Mr. McNabb, would you like to give your report, please? Oh, sorry, hang on here. We have moved by Councillor Potter and second by Councillor Klumpus. I don't want my clerk getting upset at me. So, Mr. McNabb, would you like to speak to your report, please?
So, good morning, Warden and County Council. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see that okay?
Yep, yeah, it's coming in clear here.
Okay, so for this report, there's two recommendations. The first one, that the response time standard for 2021 be approved and be submitted to the Ministry of Health. And also that staff bring back a report to County Council prior to 2021 budget deliberations of looking at enhanced staffing to improve response times. So each year we have to submit a report to the ministry that outlines the upcoming year response time standard. It's for the targets within the County of Grey, and this one will be for the 2021 operational year. And we do this under Regulation 257 Part A for the response time performance standards. So the response time targets, there's six of them. The first one being for our response to cardiac arrest within 6 minutes. The ministry sets the time and we set the percentile. The second one for CTAS 1 patients, which is our most critical urgent, is set at 8 minutes and we set the percentile. And then for CTAS 2, 3, 4, and 5 patients, we set the time and the percentile that will respond in. So just a bit of an update of where we're at as far as response times go. In 2019, we met all targets except for CTAS 2, and that's been like that for the last 3 to 4 years now. And we're slightly under that area as well, but in other areas, we're meeting all those targets. In the last couple of years, we hadn't met in the cardiac arrest, but this year and last year, we've met in that area as well. So meeting those targets, you can see the average over the last 4 years that we've been really doing really well as far as meeting the targets, and we're very close on the CTAS 2. We also look at not just broken down by CTAS levels, just to give an overall look as far as 9 times out of 10, how often we get there for all code 4s instead of actually breaking them down by CTAS. And in 2020, it's 15 minutes and 17 seconds. In 2019, it's 14:51. Keeping in mind the largest part of the winter, January, February, March, it may decrease as the year goes on. We'll have better weather, depending upon what November, December are like. And our average response time is roughly comparable to last year. To June 30th, it's 7 minutes, 59 seconds, and last year it was 7 minutes and 43 seconds. You can see though, when you look at these calls, when people talk about average response time versus percentile response time, there is a big difference in how you measure that. Really, truly, it says 9 times out of 10 or 9,000 calls out of 10,000 calls that we would be there in that amount of time versus taking every call and averaging it over the calls. So what we're recommending is to maintain the same targets for the 2021 year. And that would be that for sudden cardiac arrest, which also would include an ambulance arriving or a community defibrillator on site, would be 40% of the time at 6 minutes or less. CTAS 1, which is the life-threatening calls, that we would be there in 8 minutes, 60% of the time or less. CTAS 2, which are our emergency calls, we'd be there in 15 minutes or less than 90% of the time. And CTAS 3, which is our urgent calls, we'd be there in 20 minutes or less, 90% of the time. And CTAS 4, which we consider less urgent, 20 minutes or less, 90% of the time. And then the non-urgent, be there in 20 minutes or less, 90% of the time. These targets have remained relatively the same, other than in 2016 that we reduced the response time. It used to be 30 minutes, but because of performance, we went to 20 minutes. As far as emergency call volumes go, this year we have seen a decrease in calls, approximately 8.9% to June 30th. Across the province, we're seeing this. It looks like COVID had limited some people from calling an ambulance. The call volume's been down. We don't know for sure if that's the reason, but it looks like it's been across the province. We've seen those decreases. But it is important to note that we do see annual increases over the last 10 years of 3.4% for code 3s and 5.9% for code 4s. When we developed these targets, back in 2012, we were still doing a significant number of non-emergency calls. Our total call volume was 10,934, and our non-emergency call volume was 2,796. Before that, we've even done over 4,000 non-emergency calls. But because of the rising call volumes, we've increased our response to emergency calls and reduced our response abilities to non-emergency calls. So if you look at where we're at in 2019, we only did 237 on emergency calls, and our emergency call volume was 11,681. For a total call volume 11,918. In 2019, our call volume was approximately 1,000 calls more than when we developed the response time targets. So we're doing more calls now than what we were. In 2019, our increase in our calls was only 1.49%, but it's important to recognize in the last 3 years, added up, our call volume has increased 19% alone. So just in regards to this year, we're less last year than we normally have been seeing in the last number of years. We just, if we keep these yearly increases in call volumes, we'll have to look at additional resources or changes in targets or a different way of delivering service. A bit about Chatsworth coverage. In 2019, in January 19th, the Chatsworth base went operational. It's covered by our community paramedic and also staffing at Owen Sound when available till noon. And then from 12 to 12, we have a car book on there. We use that car quite regularly. It is used for coverage. It does get pulled back into Owen Sound for calls, but we do our best to maintain coverage out at the Chatsworth location. In 2019, in the Chatsworth municipality, there were 379 code 4s and 145 code 3s, which are code 4. Again, it gets kind of mixed up with CTAS, but that's our dispatch priority. Code 4 calls are life and death, and code 3 calls are urgent calls. Still emergencies, but not really considered life-threatening. We have seen improvements in the Chatsworth response time. Overall, for code 4 calls, they've decreased by 3 minutes from 2017, and during staff time by 4 minutes, and our average response time has dropped by 2 minutes. Since January 2019, we haven't really seen a lot of changes when we broke it down by CTAS for this sudden cardiac arrest and the CTAS ones. Those are the 6 and 8 minute response times, but we have seen improvements CTAS 2 to CTAS 5. So this kind of gives you a chart here of explains of our response times, and you can see that from 2017 how we've reduced the 90th percentile on the average, and you can see where it's staffed and where we're providing coverage, where we have the additional car in Owen Sound that we can move out there, or community paramedics out there, that we reduce the response times. But at times when it's not staffed or covered by a community paramedic, the 90th percentile is higher, and same with the average response time. So as far as financial and resource implications, there's no immediate effect on budgets or staffing or legal information, but we are looking at options to improve the response time, and we hope to bring a report for future consideration prior to budget to look at different areas where we can look at improving response times. So I'll just stop sharing my screen there.
Well, thank you very much for that report, Kevin. Very thorough, as you normally do, and that's great. Other questions from county councillors?
Mr. Warden, I have Councillor Potter and Millen.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Potter first, and then Councillor Millen. Councillor Potter?
Okay. Thank you, Warden, and thank you, Kevin, for your report. I just noticed a lot of times that I believe it's one of the cars from Meaford is over here in Thornbury, probably as a backup. And it seems like that has increased, and maybe it's just my my perspective, but I just wonder if you have any notion that it has, and whether we need to look at, or whether you're looking at what's going on in this corner, so that we're not leaving Meaford, Blue Mountains, and other areas up here in the northeast corner of the county short.
So through you, Mr. Warden, our response times as far as in those areas are remaining about the same. Our standby coverages are up. What you'll see when we're in the vehicles in Thornbury, there could be two scenarios. One is that Blue Mountains car is out and Meaford is in Thornbury covering, or it could be the other way, is where Meaford's out and Blue Mountain is covering. But also what happens, and quite often, is at least 40% of our call volume is in Owen Sound. So they actually get pulled over. So Meaford would go to Owen Sound, and then Blue Mountains would go to Thornbury. So that kind of moves the coverage across the top. When we do have the additional car, we have a first response car, and we also have an additional car in Owen Sound. It does work the other way though, where that car will go from Meaford, from Owen Sound to Meaford, and then Meaford will go to Blue Mountain. So technically, what we try to do is we have 8 base locations. We try to fill those base locations with a vehicle in each of those municipalities. And if we can't, then we meet somewhere in the middle, like where we can reduce that response time that we cover off as best we can. So like, especially at night, we see these issues where there happens once Chatsworth goes off at midnight, is that Meaford will be coming across and Craig Leith will be sitting in Thornbury.
Okay, Councillor Potter? It probably depends on seasonal items as well. Right.
Like in the winter time in Blue Mountain, we actually send a lot of resources from Owen Sound and all these other areas to Blue Mountains, because we could have 4 calls happening there at a time. So it's a consistent movement. Like you can see the screen behind me. We monitor this all the time, where our vehicles are, what stage of the call they're on, who's available, who's coming available. It's all day long. It's not about really where the call's happening. We are concerned about that. It's about where coverage is coming from, to ensure that if somebody else calls, that they have a reasonable response time.
Right. Okay, thank you for that, Kevin. And Councillor Millen.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Kevin, thank you for the report. Very comprehensive, as it always is. Question I have is, and it's a similar question I have every year. And you alluded to you're asking for a staff report to enhance staffing, and I'm just wondering, how does the county geography impact our response time? The response times in the charts that you gave in your report are summarized for across the county, but I'm sure there are some parts of the county geography that have higher response times than others. And will your report make recommendations on how to fix those response times? Because certainly there are parts of the county where if you have a heart attack, it's a recovery mission. It's not a help mission.
We'll leave that to your quote, Councillor Millen.
Absolutely.
Kevin?
So yeah, we do look at all areas of the county and response time, and really in the county of Grey, with being 4,500 square kilometers, one base location is as big as the whole city of Toronto. I used to work there. We have 110 ambulances in 600 square kilometers, where in Grey that could be one station area. So we are steady as far as our volume is concerned, but one of our biggest struggles in Grey is the area that we try to cover. And that's really one of the issues that we have is when we lose vehicles to calls, because they don't just happen one at a time. We can get 3, 4, 5 calls at a time, and covering that area, when that happens, that's when it starts to become difficult. And then and then also looking at the areas of the county that to look at for coverage, whether it be in the east corner or in the middle in Chatsworth or up in, up along the Georgian Bay, up in the Cobble Beach area. Those are kind of things that, we'll look at in the report and bring information like that forward.
Okay, thank you very much. And certainly my question was not meant to be critical by any stretch of the imagination. You folks do a tremendous job and we all appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Millen, for that. Any other questions or comments?
Councillor Mackey.
Okay, go ahead then. Thanks, Madam Clerk. Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Warden. And yes, thanks very much for the report, Kevin. Certainly nice to see that the response times when we do open up an additional station, that it has a positive respect on response times. Just to follow up on what Councillor Millen was mentioning, it would be interesting to see, in your staff report, where additional sites should be located to reduce the overall response time throughout the county. So certainly look forward to that, and thanks for the report.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Mackey, and you're right. A life is a life. Doesn't response time is very important when it comes to cardiac arrest or those type of things. So we try to do our best in that sense for sure. Other questions, comments from county councillors? Anybody out there, Madam Clerk?
Nothing that I can see, Mr. Warden.
Okay, so we see there's no other comments then. So the motion is on the floor. It's been moved by Councillor Hicks, Councillor Hicks and Councillor Woodbury. No, sorry, Councillor Potter and Councillor Klumpus. I apologize for that. Anybody opposed to that motion? Seeing none, that is carried. Okay, moving on. Our next motion is moved by Councillor Hicks and Councillor Woodbury, and this is for the report CCRCWO 620. And this is with regards to appointment to a couple of our committees. And Madam Clerk, would you wish to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. As council will note from the agenda or the report, there are 2 vacancies on 2 subcommittees that require filling. One is the Climate Change Task Force, and the other is the CAO Performance Evaluation Committee. Each committee has 1 vacancy, so 1 position for each one to be filled. Councillors Potter, Mackey, Burley, and Soever have indicated their desire to be considered for the CAO committee, while Councillors Hutchinson and Carlton have indicated their wish to stand for the Climate Change Task Force. Councillor Boddy had put his name forward, but has subsequently withdrawn that. And since the agenda was published, Councillor Desai has also indicated his interest in the CAO committee. So the first thing I'm going to ask, I'm going to go with the CAO committee. Is there anyone wishing to withdraw their name from that list? And that list is Councillors Burley, Desai, Mackey, Potter, and Soever.
Anybody out there that wishes to denounce their name? Okay, Madam Clerk. Councillor Mackey.
Yes, I'll certainly withdraw my name. There's lots of worthy candidates on the docket, so I'm fine stepping aside. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that honorable decision. Okay, so anybody else? Madam Clerk, I'll leave it with you, sorry.
No, okay. And for the climate change, Councillor Carlton and Hutchinson, are either of you wishing to withdraw your name? I don't see any, okay. Is there anyone, oh, Councillor Hutchinson.
Councillor Hutchinson?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I had to remember to unmute myself. I'll withdraw if Councillor Carlton's interested, and that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Is there anyone, any council member wishing to have their name added to either the CAO committee for consideration or the climate change? Seeing none, then I can confirm that Councillor Carlton will be our member of the Climate Change Task Force. As you know, Councillor Carlton, that task force is meeting this afternoon, so Rob Hatton will send you an invite.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Congratulations.
For the CAO, yes. For the CAO committee, then we have 4 members for 1 position, so we will require an election. As we did before, I will ask each member in alphabetical order to provide brief comments on why they should be considered for this position. And this time we will vote using the raise hand feature. Everybody has seemed really well versed on it this morning, so I think that's great. So we will start with Councillor Burley.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I think I'm a great candidate for this committee. I've been around the horseshoe for a good number of years. I've seen a lot of CAOs come and go. I think I have a vast experience when it comes to matters like this, so I think I'd make a great candidate.
Thank you. Councillor Desai.
I'll have to be very careful with what I say, lest councillors ever take anything that I say as an endorsement of his candidacy here. But I'll point out that I have served on this very committee in the past, and I think given that given my experience on that committee, I would like to go back on it. In addition, I've also been on the CAO evaluation committee at the lower tier, and as well as I've been on various evaluation committees outside of the municipal world. I think that that strengthens my candidacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Desai. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I have a lot of experience in municipal government, going back to my newspaper days, going back to the 70s, watching various CAOs. Well, back in those days, they were usually called town managers or something of that nature. So I've watched a lot in various municipalities, including several of yours. I also, having been an employee of the town of the Blue Mountains back about 10 or 12 years ago, I worked with the CAO at that time. I have been involved in evaluating our own CAO for the past few years. And I also am not currently on any county committees since my appointment back in during the winter. So I would like the opportunity to be involved in this way and share some of the workload. So those are my qualifications, and I hope I can get your support.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Soever.
Yes, thank you, Madam Clerk. Yes, I'm very interested in the position. I was interested before, but being a first-time mayor, although I have a lot of experience in evaluating CEOs in private business, I was wanting to spend my time on learning the job of mayor, so I did not apply at first and deferred to Councillor Bertnicki at the time. Now that she unfortunately resigned, the position is open again, and I think we can bring my experience in evaluating CEOs to bear. I'd also point out that in the town of Blue Mountains, since being elected, we have introduced a performance management plan for all senior staff. It's got the ringing endorsement of all the senior staff and the CAO, and it includes a bonus system, and they're all very happy with that. And I'm also happy to report that in light of COVID, they voluntarily gave up their bonuses for this year in order to help the town meet the budget shortfall from COVID. And we are implementing the plan this year in terms of performance management, but the bonuses will kick in next year at the request of staff. So that just goes to show that we did plan together, and I would hope that I can contribute at the county level just as successfully.
Thank you, Councillor Soever. So we're going to go to a vote, but before I do that, are there any questions before we move to that? Seeing none. So we will be using the raise hand feature. We will again go in alphabetical order. So voting for Councillor Burley, please raise your hand, and you may vote for yourself. Any other votes? I see 2 votes for Councillor Burley. Oh, I'm sorry. 3 votes for Councillor Burley. Thank you. All right, Councillor Desai.
Sorry, hang on a second.
Oh, Tara's just resetting the votes. Just a moment. Set? Okay. Councillor Desai. Any more for Councillor Desai? That is 7 votes for Councillor Desai. We'll reset. Okay. Councillor Potter. Any more? That is 5 votes for Councillor Potter. Thank you. We've reset. Councillor Soever. Any more for Councillor Soever? 4 for Councillor Soever. Councillor Desai has been elected to the CAO committee.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. That's all I have.
Well, thank you, Madam Clerk, and congratulations to Councillor Desai and congratulations to Councillor Carlton. Just, Madam Clerk, can you just add the other names that are on the CAO evaluation and on the other committee with regards to the climate change? Sorry. Sorry,
Off the top of my head, Councillors Body, Millen, and Hutchinson for the CAO.
Along with the warden.
Along with the warden. And I'm just going to.
And that will include Councillor
Climate
Desai.
change. Yes, that will include Councillor Desai. And if I go to the climate change, that is the warden, Councillor Desai, Woodbury, Hutchinson, Gamble, and Hicks.
Great. And Carlton.
And Carlton.
Okay, thank you for that, Madam Clerk. And again, thanks for everybody stepping up and wanting to serve on those committees. Okay, so then do we have any other discussion then with regards to that motion that's on the floor that's including the 2 members?
I see Councillor Hutchinson's hand up.
Councillor Hutchinson, you can go ahead and speak there.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I just had a question. You just read off the climate control there.
Oh,
and
you're not on it.
You put my name on there, so.
I was
Okay, I'm
looking on
good.
the website and we'll have
Pardon
that
me?
corrected.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. I just wanted to
Thank you.
clarity on that. Thank you.
You can be an advisor, Councillor Hutchinson.
That
Okay.
I can do. I'll be on standby.
Very good. Any other questions to that resolution that's including those 2 names now? Any other question? Okay, and again, that was moved by Councillor Hicks and seconded by Councillor Woodbury. Is there anybody opposed to that resolution? All right, seeing none, that's carried. And now we'll move on to our next report, CCR CW 0720. And I have it moved by Councillor Robinson and seconded by Councillor Keaveney. And I think Heather and Kim, you're going to speak to this report.
That's right. Would you like me to start, Kim? So this committee is moving forward following a notice of motion in which council endorsed the formation of the Agricultural Advisory Committee. In order to have a starting point for the committee and determine appropriate outside stakeholders, a draft terms of reference was completed and it was attached to the report for your information. The draft terms of reference will be reviewed at the very first Agricultural Advisory Committee, and any subsequent changes will be brought forward through those minutes for council's consideration. As far as membership, it's recommended that 4 members of council plus the warden along with 6 agricultural representatives, form the committee. The representatives would include a member from either of the 3 agricultural organizations in the county, being Grey County Federation of Ag, National Farmers Union, or the Christian Farmers Union, a representative from Grey County Agricultural Services, a commercial livestock, grain, or fruit and vegetable producer, an agricultural business supplier, an agritourism owner or operator, and a field to table rep. We thought that would provide a very broad stakeholder involvement from many areas of the agricultural sector. And of course, additional memberships or delegations from other agricultural stakeholders would be on an as required basis following discussions with the committee. Once the council membership is passed, then staff from a number of departments, including the clerk's economic development, tourism, and communications, will work together to ensure that there's a widespread communication to the various stakeholder groups and communities related to the membership opportunities that this committee presents, in order to look for volunteers who are interested in serving on this committee. Once the applications are received, a report will be brought back to Committee of the Whole for support of public stakeholders for the Agricultural Advisory Committee. The following councillors have indicated their interest in this committee: Councillors Robinson, Woodbury, and Soever. Since the agenda was published, Councillor Keaveney has also indicated her interest. So that is the 4 members plus the warden from council. Is there anyone else at this particular time who is interested in putting their name forward for this committee? Seeing none, I'm looking to see if there are any questions from any member of council on the terms of reference or the report. And I don't know whether, Kim, if you have anything to add to my comments or not.
Madam CEO, do you have anything to add to Heather's report there?
You're on mute, Kim.
Apologies, everyone. Only to ensure that council is clear. We do have the Economic Development and Planning Advisory Committee. We do have staff in economic development that are actively working in support of the agricultural sector, and through things like Ag 4.0. We anticipate that work will continue on. The Agriculture Advisory Committee's mission and purpose is one of acting as the voice for the agricultural community at council, and to coordinate and communicate between organizations back to council with regard to sector specific issues and or opportunities. So we will, in a sense, have 2 groups really focused on keeping a finger on the pulse of what the ag sector is seeing and needing to be successful in the county.
And Madam CEO, that's a good point you raise, in the sense we need to communicate that very, very loudly, in the sense of how in depth Grey County is with regards to agriculture, because it's a good news story in that sense, for sure. And thanks for raising that. Any comments? I will say that the representative from field to table, I think, is a good part on there, because I think that ties in a little bit to the farmers market and with regards to the consumer basis itself as well. And I think that's a nice part of, in my opinion, to add there. Okay, so the motion is on the floor. It includes the 5 representatives.
Mr. Warden,
sorry.
I'm sorry,
Yep.
Councillor Millen has a comment.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Millen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just a quick question to Kim in regards to the role or the mandate of the advisory committee. As I alluded to this morning in the debate about the OPA in Meaford, would that be a role for this committee? Would they be consulted on something regarding that issue?
Okay, comments?
Okay. Well, certainly through our normal planning practices and processes, there are also always public consultation opportunities where there are planning matters of significance. But in general, I think that you raise an excellent point, Councillor Milne, that if there was if somebody wanted to bring forward this matter on a general basis to have a very specific discussion with the ag sector around these matters, I think that would be an interesting conversation and good information for all of us going forward.
Thanks for that comment, Councillor Milne. I think I picked up from what you're gathering there, and that's a good comment, I think, in the sense of having that avenue to speak to that uniqueness I think you're maybe mentioning. Okay, any other comments?
I'll give you an Potter.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Potter.
Yes, just to pick up on what Councillor Milne said. I think it's important that these kind of issues be filtered through this Agriculture Advisory Committee. It's the reason to have it. Because an economic development committee is too general in scope to realize some of the more specific issues that affect the agricultural industry. So I think that as a matter of course, it would be great to have these sorts of things filtered through the Ag Advisory Committee.
Okay, thanks for those comments. Are there any other comments? I know, Madam CEO, you mentioned we received that letter, I think, a couple of meetings back where it was with regards to protein processing. And I think you suggested that would be, when you get correspondence like that, that would be a great opportunity to forward that off to this committee once they're up and running to sort of make those comments to what they feel on the agricultural sector. And that's with regards to meat processing and that. So that could be one of their first agenda items, I presume. So, okay, no other questions or comments there. And again, that was moved by Councillor Robinson and second by Councillor Keaveney. Anybody opposed to that resolution? Okay, so that is carried. Our next item is item CAOR CW 1320. And this is moved by Councillor Hicks, second by Councillor Millen. And I think, Madam CEO, you're taking this report.
I am. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Warden. And Council, if you've had an opportunity to review the substance of the report, I'll just give you kind of a high-level overview. You'll recall that last February, when we had our budget discussion at Council, the Blue Mountain ratepayers provided a delegation to Council where they gave some information about their thoughts with regard to the county budget and also asked a number of questions. Staff approached the delegates after their delegation and offered to meet with them to try and explain and answer some additional questions. It's unfortunate that in the interim, COVID happened and we weren't able to have that face-to-face meeting. Although I did attend the Blue Mountains budget meetings, their budget open house, and was prepared with information about the county's budget and to speak on items requiring clarification to anyone who attended that. Since that time, we've exchanged some correspondence with the Ratepayers Association. Some of it was very much a matter of fact and some specific numbers that they were looking for. However, most recently in July, the letter that I had from them kind of started to get into more matters of what I would consider policy or process. And I indicated to them that I felt it was important that Council be apprised of this and have an opportunity to give some direction to staff, which is why I'm bringing this forward. And so wanted to make sure that it was clear to the ratepayers and anyone else where we are having to meet regulatory requirements and where we have some discretion. And as you know, if you looked at the correspondence, I hope what comes comes clear out of that is that the county does a great deal of reporting back to the province that the services that we deliver are services for the most part that we are required to deliver, and the standards that we're held to are standards that are best practices and standards that the province requires of us. Many of our services are ones where we're working within a budget envelope that the province has provided. And some of those budget areas have seen decreases, especially on the administrative side of funding. And we've had to take action and manage our expenditures to stay within those budget envelopes. What I hope that we could get from this report today was any direction to me and then to the rest of the staff, if council feels that there is a place for looking at alternate methods or significant expenditure reductions or any other direction around policy or procedure that you'd like to provide to me at this time. This is something that we can then start to work towards and be prepared to have a good discussion at our strategic planning session in October. So I'll leave it there, and I'm very happy to take any questions that anyone would like to ask.
Mr. Warden, you are on mute.
It happens to the best of us. Thank you, Madam CAO. I thank you for those words, and I know that with the announcement yesterday of the $3 million with regards to our COVID-19 expense has helped a little bit of alleviating some of those concerns that are that have hit us this year. Saying that, I'm going to open it up for questions and comments from County Council.
I have Councillors Soever and Potter.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Soever first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. Yes, as you can see from the correspondence, our ratepayers are a very engaged group. For a number of years, they've been spending a lot of time on reviewing the town budget and subjecting our town council and the budget process to scrutiny. Hence, our budget process is now 4 days. And so they're a fairly sophisticated group, a lot of former CEOs, vice presidents of large banks and things like that. So they understand budgets and spending. I think their increased engagement at the county level is a healthy thing. It's partly a consequence of disbanding the Town of Blue Mountains Task Force and the suggestion that upon the task force that matters should be brought to council and Cao. So they took that to heart, and it looks like that's what they're doing. They do tell me their concerns, but they are independent, and certainly instead of Councillor Potter and myself dealing with matters through the task force, we're happy to have them now dealing with some of the matters because it takes a lot of responsibility off our shoulders. So some of the issues that you see there that they're particularly concerned about is some duplication in planning matters, subdivision approvals and the like. We obviously have a planning department here, which they pay for through their municipal taxes, and they are concerned that there's a bit of duplication there, and they are interested in that. One of the other matters you see there is the fire communications. They know that our fire chief has no concerns with our ability to communicate with our neighbors, and certainly we see that as very important. We did upgrade our radio frequencies and our system a few years ago, so that was done at great expense at the local level, and now they're concerned we're being asked to pay for it again at the county level when we've already done it. Similarly, they've talked about, not in their letter, but to me, about the aid we provide to others, which we have no problem doing. They but they see similarities there where, you know, we have invested in equipment, which we regularly use outside our boundaries to help out other municipalities, which they don't have a problem with. But in light of the radio communications system, they are concerned that, you know, other neighboring municipalities perhaps are lagging a bit behind in equipping and their first responders with the appropriate training and equipment. So they're concerned about what the effects of that will be in the future. So it is a long list, and I think, you know, it's good that they're involved, because I'm sure with their focus on the county now, as a result of the disbanding of the Blue Mountains Task Force, that people in our community are becoming much more aware that we are part of a county. And so that is a positive. Obviously, it's going to require our attention. And so that's what we're here to do. And that's really all I have to say.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Councillor Swever. And Councillor Potter.
Thank you. And I think Councillor Swever covered a lot of the ground, but I do point your attention to the questions regarding reinvestment and infrastructure. I know that everybody is seeing increased traffic. I doubt they're seeing what we're seeing and dealing with some of the things that we're dealing with. And maybe it's because of COVID, maybe it's because of other things. We know, for example, that we're going to see population growth here because more and more people are looking at moving here full time. We're seeing more children, for example, enrolling at our local school. So we are going to have to be dealing with these things, and our residents are concerned about them. So are we, of course, but they want to know that that the county is on us. This traffic, for example, on our roads is not only coming to the Blue Mountains, it's coming, as I'm sure Councillor Desai would want to remind me, it's coming through Grey Highlands, it's coming through Chatsworth, through Meaford, and of course through our neighboring Simcoe County. So we have to deal with this, and the county has to be a full partner and has to look very carefully at whether we're assigning enough priority to dealing with the situations that are arising with traffic through our area. So I think with that, I'll leave it, but I thank Councillor Swever for his comments earlier as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Potter. Other comments from county councillors?
Councillor Desai.
Go ahead, Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm actually very happy that Councillor Potter takes what I say to heart. I'm very impressed. I would also like to point out, Mr. Warden, that the last time that there were there was a delegation from the ratepayers in the town of Blue Mountains, they were also looking for the county to invest in things such as recreation. We've repeatedly seen that there is a lack of investment in the town of Blue Mountains, not just from the county, if in fact the county does underinvest there, but also on the township's own side. I think I'd also like to go back to when we discussed our county budget last year, and I did request that we look at adding more money to the budget for asset management and other such opportunities. And if I remember correctly, the members from the town of Blue Mountains were not supportive of that. And so I think for too long as a council, and this is not just county, not just town of Blue Mountains, but as councils in general, we have put the need to have a lower tax rate over the need to have proper working infrastructure and proper investments in infrastructure. So while I can appreciate the correspondence that we've received, at the same time, I also think that it's not something that's going to be fixed in one term of council. It's also not something that's going to be fixed just by the county making more investments in the town of Blue Mountains. It's something that's going to need change at the county as well as at local municipal levels. And a lot of that will probably come from education that maybe the budgets do need to be a little higher at some point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Desai, and I hope you and Mr. Potter get along very well. Any other questions?
We've got matching masks, I think.
Oh, well, I'm not going to go there.
Councillor Soever, I'm sorry, has a subsequent.
Okay, just before I go to Councillor Soever, is there anybody else that wants to speak first? I hear none. Councillor Soever, go ahead.
Councillor Soever, you're on
Sorry.
mute.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Yes, and I want to thank Councillor Desai for his comments, and I will agree with him. There has been underspend in a number of areas, and councils in the past have not spent. We are doing a new leisure activities plan. Certainly, we do not spend, I've looked at it, as much on recreation as some of the neighboring municipalities. Some people say we have a low tax rate, but people have to realize if you have a small wood frame house here, and I know the former warden and the current warden have seen these little homes on our main street that are worth $600,000. Which might be in Hanover or any of the other municipalities worth $300,000. These people pay twice in county taxes what they do in other communities, which impairs our ability to raise taxes at the local level. Because if you're a retired person who's lived here for 50 years and through no fault of your own, your house is now worth $600,000, and your county tax bill is twice what it would be in any other part of Grey County, you cannot afford to pay as much in local taxes just because your assessment is high. Our tax rate might be low, but the dollar number for these individuals on a limited income is very, very high. And so we have to weigh that. And certainly, I would like to spend much more at the local level to provide some of these things that Councillor Desai talks about. But and it's no one's fault. It's just the structure and what's happened with the market. But the tax structure has put us in a place where our taxes may not be high on a rate number, but in a dollar number on a home of similar quality are hugely different. They're more than double at the county level what they are anywhere else in Grey County. So this is and Councillor Desai is right. We aren't spending enough. And what we can do to collect that money to spend enough, well, that's what we're struggling with.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor Soever. Other comments?
I see Councillor Desai has a subsequent. I don't think there's anyone else that I see, Mr. Warden.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Desai, you have a secondary question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So I agree with Councillor Soever. At the same time, we do have to realize that Town of Blue Mountains pays per $100 of assessment the same as every other municipality, I would imagine, or I would hope so, unless there's a definite agenda against Town of Blue Mountains. I agree with him that it's through no fault of the resident that their house is now worth $600,000. Is it a fault of how we tax property? Maybe. That's a different topic and a different question, though. So
just hang on, Councillor Desai. Can somebody put their computer on mute? There seems to be some sound coming through there. I don't know where it's coming from. Sorry about that, Councillor Desai. I just want to make sure everybody can hear you. Go ahead. It's gone away now.
Sorry. Yeah. So I think it's if it could be it could possibly be an issue with how we tax property, and that's fine. We can have that discussion, but I don't think this is the right time for that discussion.
Well, certainly, I think the idea of the report is some of these items can be spoke at our strategic planning meeting that we're planning in October. Some of the core reports of that debate, and that could be further discussed at that time. So these are good conversations that we're having today on those points. And thank you for that, Councillor Desai. Are there any other comments or questions with regards to the Madam CAO's report? So, Madam CAO, you were looking for a little bit of direction. I thought I caught that in your deputation to your report, that is there further direction you need for your report? Before I go to Councillor Millen, I just want to get that comment back from the CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. I think what I will do in preparation for the strategic planning session in October, I will have a discussion with the CAO committee. Hopefully we can get a meeting set up for that in early October. And as well, I'll survey all of council. And that way, if people have ideas of what they'd like to see on that agenda, there'll be an opportunity for them to bring those forward at that time.
And maybe I can meet with you as well. I know I had one-on-ones with all county councilors except Councillor Robinson, and just didn't hook up with COVID-19. I can maybe share some of those points that were raised much earlier this year. Thank you for that. And Councillor Robinson, you and I can still have that last one-on-one. We will do that. Councillor Millen, I think you had shown you wish to speak.
Just real quickly, I wanted to indicate that to CAO Wingrove that I think the process that we've used in the past has worked very well. There's always been a very in-depth, engaged conversation about what we want to do, where we want to go, how we want to do it. Our senior staff are always really good at coming up with new ideas on how we could do something different if need be. So I look forward to the discussion at the strategic planning event.
Okay, and thank you for that, Councillor Millen. And Madam CEO or Madam Clerk, what was the date on that? I can't pull my calendar up. So
October 15th.
Sorry?
October 15th.
October 15th. So that'll be just after Thanksgiving, correct? I presume. Okay, thank you for that. Any last comments to the report? Moving forward to the Councillor Hicks, Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I just want to compliment the staff. You can see from this report a significant amount of time and work, patience has gone in to this portfolio, and I think they need to be complimented for that.
Okay, well, thank you for those comments, Deputy Warden, Councillor Hicks. And yeah, we need to always give our gratitude for all the hard work our staff do for sure. Okay, seeing there's no other questions or comments, so it was moved by Councillor Hicks, second by Councillor Millen. Are there anybody opposed to this motion? Seeing none, that is carried. Okay, that is done. So going back by memory, at this time, Madam Clerk, was there anything pulled from the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Warden. Councillor Soever requested that item G, the Affordable Housing Task Force minutes from July, be pulled. So we'll need to have those moved and seconded.
Okay, so Councillor Soever, do you wish to move those?
Yes.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Madam Clerk, you see somebody there? Councillor Potter? I just saw a hand there, so, okay, so, so those
yes,
are...
yes, Warden, that was me.
Yeah, okay, so that is on the floor, so I'm going to go to Councillor Soever, so you can now speak to that, that item.
Yes, I'm very pleased that we were able to have the meeting of the Affordable Housing Task Force, and you'll see in minutes of that which we just pulled, and just wanted to bring Council's attention to the draft that we are being asked to approve that the draft action plan be worked on as for developing the terms of reference for the task force. And there's 3 points right toward the end of the minutes there that I think are fundamental to the mandate, as well as, of course, the items brought forth in the action plan. Those 3 items at the back are looking at any action plan that's developed with any terms of reference that are developed with respect to the action plan, of course, need to take into account where the financing is going to come for these projects, and who the target audience is. So you can see that in the minutes, the paragraph at the bottom of the second last page talks about, you know, having something sustainable that can finance itself, or is there to have something that requires county funds in the budget every year? And obviously there's no sense of spending a couple of years working on putting together an action plan and bringing it to council, and council then says, well, we don't want to finance this. This plan's no good because it has to be self-financed. This plan isn't. So I think that's fundamental. The other thing which we've struggled with in the town of Blue Mountains is to determine who the target audience is, and that's the second last paragraph. We already do social housing at the county. So here in the town of Blue Mountains, we're targeting not those people that the county is serving already. We are targeting the missing middle. So those are people with an income between 40 and 100,000 that are priced out of the town of the Blue Mountains market. So it is careful. We do need to be careful in the mandate of the committee is to identify, is this committee going to just augment what we're already doing in housing for the same audience, or is it going to target the missing middle? You know, people that need an entry-level home but can't afford it on an average salary or even a better than average salary. Like when you're looking at $600,000 for a starter home, you know, that means that's the target that we're trying to serve with our attainable housing. So I think it's also important that we don't get duplication with over-serving a segment of the population by having local municipalities and the county do it at the same time. And to that end, you know, the last paragraph, you know, talks about, you know, both of those subjects, because it does actually say that most successful developments are a mix of affordable rent geared to income and market rent units. So if we are targeting something that is sustainable and doesn't require the county to put in millions of dollars every year, then we do need to plan for developments that can sustain themselves. And that will mean that you'll have to include in the development either some more expensive units for sale or maybe some commercial space, which if needed in a community can be a good driver for economic development as well. So I just wanted to pull this item to highlight that as council, when we give direction on the mandate, that we consider these items as well as the action plan, so that we ask staff to write that into the mandate. So the committee doesn't do a lot of work and it comes to council and council says, well, you're not serving the right people and we don't want to spend $4 million a year. So take your plan and go back and start again.
Well, thank you for those comments, and certainly I think the part of attainable, the ability to build, afford, or live someplace where you can, and I think that is part of that mandate, Mayor Soiver, in the sense of the ability to live, work, and play in Grey County, you know, wherever you are, in the sense, right?
Mr. Warden, I do have Councillor Desai.
Okay, Councillor Desai, you're next. Welcome. Come on.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. First of all, I'd like to commend the town of Blue Mountains for taking the step with their affordable housing projects there. One of the very interesting things that Councillor Soiver mentioned was with regards to having units that are affordable for the messy middle, or basically the people who are earning between $40,000 to $100,000 a year. And I think it's important that we recognize that messy middle, because our economy here has been built on the middle class thriving. And my question through you, Mr. Warden, to Councillor Sever, and maybe it's a premature question, is do they have a plan on how they're going to sort of control the price on such houses, if there are any houses, or are they planning on them being rental units only? Thank you.
So those are good questions that we need to tease out further of our committee for sure. And it is that challenge with regards to the cost of housing. And we know it keeps going one direction and that is up, and that's is an issue with regards to affordability for sure. I don't know if Kim or anybody else like to make a comment on that, or Anne Marie or others on the committee. This is sort of a new task force that we're putting in play, and there's the recommendations that are there to start off with. Any comments from anybody else, maybe to address?
And as I said, maybe it's a premature question, and it's something they can consider during their deliberations.
Okay, thank you. I think, Madam CEO, I thought I heard your voice there. Is that correct?
Thank you. I think we do have a couple of pieces of work that in some ways will end up coming together to try to add to our thoughts and our discussion here. When we look at the work of the upcoming Owen Sound and Hanover Task Force, I think housing issues and security of housing issues are things that may come forward in that discussion. I think I would feel that I hadn't done my job if I didn't remind council, we have a waiting list for affordable housing in the county of Grey that exceeds 750 people or families. And these are people who have nowhere to live. So I think, we do need to have another discussion perhaps at the next meeting of this task force to be very clear about where it is that we are going to put scarce resources and what the impact of investments that the county can make or facilitate will be, both for the most vulnerable people in our communities, but also to the economy as a whole.
Okay, thank you for that, Kim, and we can get lots of conversation. I know there's young people, there's first-time buyers, there's people that are, I think there's called the working poor that's even out there that are making minimum wage and can't find a place to find accommodation. And maybe that's part of what you're talking, Madam CEO, with regards to those people that can't find accommodations. And so, yeah, we'll have lots of more conversation with regards to the affordability of homes for sure. And rentals is very, very much in demand, as Anna Marie had brought forward at that meeting. So any other comments? I mean, that was our first real meeting. So,
Mr. Warden, I have Councillor Sever who'd like to provide some final comments.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Sever.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden, and I thank Councillor Desai and Madam CEO for their comments, and that's exactly what I was wanting to address by raising these points. Is we need to focus on who we're trying to serve with this and how it fits with what we're already doing. I know we can always do more. The thing is, when you serve a population that is in the kind of missing middle, you do have a hope of making it self-sustaining, because these are the working poor, or almost poor. So what we've said at the town of Blue Mountains, our minimum threshold for getting in at 40,000 of income for the family. So this could be two people making 20,000. But anyway, I understand that the Blue Mountain Sustainable Housing Corporation has applied to come and make a presentation as to what we're doing later in the fall. So I'll just wind up with that. And I think we have addressed many of these issues here in trying to pick a target market that is both, can fund a sustainable project. And then you need to also look at how you do fund the homeless. But obviously they're not in a situation to do that without substantial government assistance. So those are important questions, and I'm glad that we will be considering those.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? I know for there used to be a program out there for first-time buyers that you could save on the land transfer tax. I'm not sure if that program is still out there, but and maybe there's other incentives that we as the County of Grey could look at. Maybe it's through when we do our development charge or other things. I know in Grey Highlands, we've reduced our minimum size. We've taken it right off. So there's an opportunity for a smaller home that could be built. Maybe that ties into our development charge. If you're building a smaller unit, it has a different rate or a less rate. So I think there's a lot of dynamics that we can do that, that are incentives as well. So, okay, so that's going to be coming forward to our next meeting, and those minutes are there, and the recommendations that came out of those minutes. Any last comments to that report? And seeing none. Okay. Well, is there anybody opposed to that resolution that was on the consent agenda that was pulled up forward? Hearing none, that is carried. Okay, so that takes care, I think, of everything, Madam Clerk. That takes care of everything on the agenda. Is that correct? I guess the question.
Kim is going to speak to the AMO delegation confirmations.
Okay, very good. Okay, Madam CEO, exciting times, a whole different exciting AMO conference. I was speaking to Penny this morning, and she was saying she was reviewing the process of signing into AMO, which she recommends that I and others do watch to get the particulars of signing in there. And I understand also we have Councillor Robinson, you're running for, I think, Roma as a representative, and I think Councillor Sampson from the Mountains is running for OSAM. So good luck to those individuals too. Madam CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. So just to confirm with council, we did secure delegations with the OMAFRA Parliamentary Assistant Randy Pettipies to speak to additional broadband funding, Minister Mulrooney from MTO with regard to regional transportation, and also with Minister Fullerton with regard to long-term care and funding there. Just to echo the Warden's comments, this is a first time with this online conference, and the access to the delegations is a little more complex probably than anybody wants. So, and also I know that they're going to be just as strict as they always are about time. So I really encourage people, make sure if you're part of these delegations that you've got the information at your fingertips and you're able to get in there on time, because they are being very strict about it. Okay, thanks everyone.
Well, thank you, Madam CEO. And that's probably good to sign in at least 5 or 10 minutes beforehand. And I understand that the province is going to be sending out those links for those delegations to sign in. So yeah, cordial and prompt will be very important. And I guess, Madam CEO, we'll speak about the leads and who's speaking to which and how we're doing that. Okay, you and I can have that talk. And I think Councillor Robinson, who else is, I just have the list, who else is being part of those delegations? I think Councillor Soever, you are you not? Yes. Councillor Woodbury? Councillor Woodbury. So there's a few that's going to be. Councillor Klumpus, okay, great. And I'm not seeing any who else is, but certainly I think Councillor Hicks is also. So I think just to our next agenda, I think, Madam Clerk, coming in September, maybe there would be a good opportunity to add a little spots that we could, so those that have been part of those delegations or as part of AMO, we can talk a little bit about what we learned, and we can share back our responses or any communication, so we can certainly inform those that weren't part of the delegation or part of AMO, and certainly anything I receive or others that we forward that to the clerk for information, or it can be shared. I think it's always good that there is a cost to going to this as well, but it's always good if we can share it to other county councilors information. That's very important for sure. Okay, Madam Clerk, is there any questions? Yes.
I have Councillor Soever and Councillor Klumpus that have questions.
Okay, Councillor Soever first, then Councillor Klumpus.
Yes. When will we know the exact times? My deputy clerk yesterday, and she still hadn't received anything on timing, because we do have 3 from the town of Blue Mountains, and I want to be able to make sure that I coordinate my schedule. So is it the sooner we can
I understood that that Penny had forwarded those appointments out to everyone. I will double check that has happened, but I think I was CC'd on all of them. So we'll just make sure that that's gone out. There's two things that happen. One is the appointment itself, but then there's the second part is the actual details of how to log into the Zoom call.
Yeah.
And those aren't out yet.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And I think they're going to forward those closer to the time.
Yes.
Right. So, okay. Councillor Klumpus, you're next there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. I was just curious because we had missed the AMO webinar this morning at 10 o'clock with how to access and how to get into the conference itself and all of that instruction. I'm wondering if there's some way that we can have a repeat of that and make sure that we're all tuned in.
So I spoke to Penny just before I came on to County Council, and she said that she was viewing it and she was going to look at forwarding it to all of County Council or the link to that, so at least we can get that information. And she highly recommended we all watch it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for raising that.
Councillor
Okay.
Millen.
Sorry, Councillor Millen, is that next?
Yeah, just for clarification, are the delegations to the ministers open to all the delegates to AMO or just to those that were invited?
So I think there's two parts, Councillor Millen. There's the delegation requests, which I think will be by the names that have made those delegation requests from each minister. But there is also those forums that if you're assigned into the AMO conference, you will be able to be part of those. I think there's 3 different, they call it the bear pit sessions, but each day there's so many ministers that are available. So that's a separate part, but I think that's more open.
Right. And no, I was meaning more directly the delegations that we received from individual ministers or ministries. Are those open to all of the delegates from Grey County that are registered, or just to those councillors that have been invited to participate?
So, Madam CEO, can you speak to that at all?
We had communicated to the province, the councillors that we knew who were interested in being part of a delegation, and that was done a little while ago. If somebody wants to be added to one of the delegations, we can certainly try and communicate with the province again that we want to add somebody so that they can get they know that they're on the list and they can get the information out to them about how to log in.
So, Councillor Millen, are you attending AMO?
I'm registered for AMO, that's correct.
And are you on all the delegations or
no?
Oh, okay. So, Madam CEO, can you maybe send out a new list to make sure we know or you know who's all attending from Grey County and if they wish to be added?
I will have, Penny has sent out appointments, but I will have her send the list out again to everyone so people know who and what, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Councillor Millen. And that goes for everybody if you are going, and not only from the county's registry, but from the lower tier as well. You're still county councillors, and it's important that you're part of the big picture for sure. Madam Clerk, is there anybody else that's out there?
No, sir.
Okay, is there any other business then of County Council? Seeing none, I have it moved by Councillor O'Leary and Councillor Hicks to adjourn.
Mr. Warden, you missed notice of motion, so I don't know if there's any notices of motion.
I apologize for that. I don't have my agenda up in front of me right at the moment. So are there any notice of motions? And our next meeting is not till September
10th.
So are there any notice of motions for upcoming meetings? Okay, I hear none. And I guess 10 days prior, Madam Clerk, they can.
Yeah, I have Councillor Desai.
Councillor Desai.
Yep, sorry. So I just wanted to give an update. We had a bit of a conversation 2 meetings ago on one of my proposed notices of motion. I just wanted County Council to know that I have since had a meeting with the CAO and the Director for Transportation. And my concerns have been addressed, and I've been told that the concerns will be coming forward in a report at a future meeting. So I just wanted to thank the CAO and the Director for Transportation for working with me on that. Thank you.
Okay, and thanks for pointing that out, Councillor Desai, and thanks again for staff for reaching out to the councillor.
Mr. Warden, I have Councillor Hicks as well.
Okay, Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I don't have a notice of motion, but I'm just reminding everyone about climate change directly after this meeting. Will it be directly, or do we want to set a time?
I think we'll set a time. Kim, 1:30, 1:45?
Are we okay with 1:30? Can that work for people? Do you need an extra few minutes?
I'm seeing nods.
Seeing nods for 1:30.
1:30. And I think Rob sent out an invite, or he's going to send it. Okay, so that works. Okay, seeing there's no other business, just before I want to thank everybody and hope everybody's having a great summer and enjoy this great summer that we are having. It's I'd say it's almost next to none. Councillor Millen, the crops are growing, the pastures for the cows, and I'm sure they're coming off the fields in a great manner. So it's great to see. So enjoy it, because we get 8 months of winter, so which works for the town of the mountains. That's good, and it keeps the revenue and the generator there. So at this time, I'm going to. Is there anybody opposed to adjourning? Nobody opposes that. That's carried. Well, again, thank you, everyone, and
bye, everyone.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.